Hello everyone, this is Dr. Young, and in this video I'm just going to briefly introduce to you the biomolecule family lipids. So when people hear lipids, they usually think of oils and fats, which I totally understand. Oils and fats are lipids, but they're not synonymous, they don't mean the same thing. The definition of a lipid is pretty broad. It's a big catch-all category for any biomolecule that is poorly soluble in water. So most of these things we're going to see need like carriers to move around your bloodstream, but they're poorly water soluble, right? Which means that they're mostly made up of nonpolar bonds. So these molecules need to be mostly nonpolar. And if you remember from previous videos, right, we talked about how a way to decide if something is water soluble or not is to go with this roughly 1 to 5-ish rule, roughly 1 to 5, where 1 would be for every one polar functional group, right? Polar functional group. So we're talking about like carbonyls or alcohols, stuff like that, can help solubilize 5 nonpolar carbons. Right, so like for example with this first one, it looks like I have one polar functional group in that carbonyl. However, I have, which means, so if I have one polar functional group, that means that that molecule will be soluble if it only has 5 or fewer nonpolar carbons. And this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this would be 1 to 9, which means it is not water soluble, so we consider it a lipid. So yes, it's a lipid. Right, because it's not very water soluble. Really low solubility. However, if we go and we look at the molecule just to the right of it, I've got a polar bond. I mean, this thing is just loaded with polar bonds all over the place. And in fact, I don't have any nonpolar carbons, so this would definitely be very water soluble. So this is not a lipid, excuse me. So this would be considered not a lipid. So no, not a lipid. Go over to the right, same sort of story, right? We have polar bonds all over the place. We have like all of these are polar bonds. This thing's just loaded with polar bonds. I don't need to kind of continue here, right? This thing is just loaded, so it's also very water soluble, so it's also not going to be considered a lipid. However, if you move to the right, I've got a polar bond over here with the OH. I've got a polar function group over there. And I've got way more than 10 nonpolar carbons. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 nonpolar carbons. So yes, we would consider that thing a lipid. I keep doing that. Sorry about that. So yes, this would be a lipid. And then lastly, down here, we have this big old biomolecule, right? So where we have one polar functional group here, one here, and one here. And then you can guess that we have way more than 15 nonpolar carbons. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Already there. That's enough. 16 is too many, let alone 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 6. You can just keep on going, right? There's just so many nonpolar carbons that this molecule down here is also considered a lipid. So yes, that is also a lipid. So that's what we're looking for if we're trying to define, you're trying to decide if something's a lipid. So in this example, we have these 3 molecules right here would be lipids because they're poorly water soluble. And not all of these are fats or oils. We have a terpene in here, we have a steroid in here, and we do have one fat molecule. So like I was saying, there are really big, there are a lot of different types of molecules that fall under the lipids. We have triglycerides, which would be things like this. So here's a triglyceride. We have triglycerides, we have phospholipids, which would be this molecule right here, which makes up cell membranes. We have steroids, like this esterone right here, so we have a steroid. Up there we have terpenes, like camphor right here, here's a terpene. We have prostaglandins. I didn't show a prostaglandin, I didn't show a wax. There's a whole bunch more, like here's vitamin E, which is considered a lipid. It's a lipophilic vitamin, or it's a fat-soluble vitamin. There are so many different classes of lipids, and there's more than the 7 that I've listed, or the 6 that I've listed here. What I want you guys to know for my class is we're going to focus mainly right now on these first 3. So I want you to know triglycerides, I want you to know phospholipids, and I want you to know steroids. So watch the following videos, and we're going to talk more about what exactly makes something a triglyceride, how does that relate to fats and oils, what are trans fats, monounsaturated fats, etc. And then what are phospholipids and what's their role, and then steroids, and dispel some of the myths that you probably have heard about steroids. So keep an eye out for those videos coming up. That'll be parts 2, 3, and 4. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and happy studying.